I always knew something was off about her family. I just couldn't put my finger on it. There were the missed phone calls, the sudden changes in plans, the secretive glances at family gatherings. But I trusted her. Jess and I had been married for nearly 7 years and we had built a life together, one that I thought was solid. I didn't expect to be blindsided by the truth that her family was helping her live a double life. It all started with a phone call that wasn't meant for me. I came home early from work one afternoon hoping to surprise Jess. She wasn't home, but her phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up with an unknown number. Out of curiosity, I glanced at it and before I could think twice, I picked it up. I wasn't normally the jealous type, but something about the way she'd been acting recently had me on edge. She'd been distant, coming up with strange excuses for late nights out, but always assured me it was nothing. I slid open her phone, expecting maybe a work message or something harmless. What I saw hit me like a freight train. Miss you and the kids. Can't wait to see you all this weekend. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. The kids? We didn't have kids. Jess always said she wasn't ready yet, that we had plenty of time to start a family. But this message was too casual, too familiar. My mind raced, trying to piece together what the hell was going on. Just then, I heard the front door creak open and Jess walked in, smiling like nothing was wrong. Hey babe, she called out, setting her purse down on the counter. I couldn't hold it in. Jess, who is this? I held up her phone, the message still glaring at me like an accusation. Her face fell instantly, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't expected: fear. She hesitated for just a moment too long and I knew something was terribly wrong. It's nothing, she stammered, trying to grab the phone from my hand. But I held it back, staring her down. Miss you and the kids? I repeated, my voice rising. Jess, what the hell is this? Who is this guy? And what kids are he talking about? She stepped back, her face going pale, and that's when I realized she had no way out of this. She was caught. And she knew it. Dan, please let me explain, she whispered, her voice trembling. Explain? Explain what? You've been hiding something from me and you expect me to just stand here and let you explain it away? Who is this guy? Are you cheating on me? Tears filled her eyes and for a split second I thought she might actually deny it, might come up with some ridiculous story to cover her tracks. But instead she broke. The guilt was too heavy and the truth spilled out like poison. I've been seeing someone else, she admitted, her voice barely audible. The room spun around me. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of my lungs. Jess, my wife, was having an affair. How long? I asked, my voice cold hollow. She looked down, ashamed. 3 years. 3 years. My head spun. Our whole marriage, our whole life together, had been a lie for years. But that wasn't even the worst part. She hadn't just been cheating on me, she had another life, a second family. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she continued, tears streaming down her face. It started as a mistake, but then things got out of control. I didn't know how to stop. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the horror unraveling in front of me. You have another family? Kids. I could barely get the words out. Jess nodded, breaking down completely now. Yes, I have 2 kids with him. They don't know about you, and I've been trying to keep both lives separate. Rage bubbled up inside me, hot and uncontrollable. And your family? They knew about this. Did they help you lie to me? She looked at me wide-eyed, and I knew the answer before she even spoke. Yes, they knew. They've known for years. They helped me cover it up. Everything inside me shattered at that moment. The people I had trusted, her family, had been helping her keep this double life hidden from me. I stood there, my whole body numb, as Jess broke down in front of me, confessing the unthinkable. 3 years. 3 years of lies, of living a double life. And her family, her entire family, had been in on it, helping her cover up the fact that she had another man, another life and children. I felt like the walls of our home were closing in, suffocating me under the weight of the betrayal. They helped you, I repeated, my voice low and cold. Your whole family knew and they said nothing? They lied to me too? Jess nodded, wiping her tear-streaked face with trembling hands. They didn't want to, Dan. I begged them. I didn't know what else to do. I was trapped between 2 lives and they were trying to protect me. Please believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen. I shook my head, disbelief and fury building inside me. I felt like I was hearing some twisted soap opera plot. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my life. Trapped? You weren't trapped, Jess. You made a choice. You chose to live a lie. You chose to betray me for 3 years. And your family? Your family stood by, watched me love you, watched me build a life with you, and they helped you lie. What kind of people do that? She sank to her knees, her sobs racking her body, but I couldn't even feel sympathy. All I felt was anger. Rage that coursed through me, burning away any remnants of the life we had shared. I turned away from her, pacing the kitchen, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me, but it was useless. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice cracking with fury. "Who's this guy? And how long have you been playing house with him behind my back?" Jess sniffled, barely able to meet my eyes. "His name is Jason. We met before we got married, but it didn't get serious until a couple of years into our marriage. I tried to end it, I swear. I didn't know how to juggle everything. Then I found out I was pregnant with his child, and it all got so much more complicated." I couldn't breathe. Every word she said felt like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. She had been living this lie, this second life, while pretending to be my wife. I had no idea who she was anymore. "So, you have kids with him?" I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside I was screaming. "Where does he think you are when you're with me?" "He knows about you," she admitted softly. "He knows about our marriage, but he doesn't know how much of my life I've been splitting between you both. He thinks I'm divorcing you." I froze, the words hitting me harder than anything she had said so far. "He thinks she's divorcing me." That was it, the final betrayal. She hadn't just cheated. She had already made plans to leave, had built an entire future with someone else, while I had been living in a fool's paradise. "How long have you been planning to leave me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jess looked at me, guilt written all over her face. "I wasn't going to leave, Dan. I didn't know what to do. I kept putting it off, thinking I could make it right somehow. I didn't want to destroy you. I didn't want to ruin everything." "You didn't want to destroy me?" I laughed bitterly. "Jess, you've already destroyed me. You've been living a lie for years with his kids, while pretending to be my wife. Do you even hear yourself? Do you realize what you've done?" She cried harder, her shoulders shaking as she tried to reach for me, but I pulled away. I couldn't bear her touch. The thought of her hands on me after knowing what she'd done sickened me. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the cracks in the facade? But then again, why would I have suspected anything? Her family, her entire family, had been complicit in this. I had trusted them too. I had spent holidays with them, shared meals, laughed with them, all while they were helping her hide the truth. I turned to Jess, my voice flat and emotionless. "So, your parents, your brothers, everyone knew? Every single one of them helped you lie to me?" She nodded miserably. "They didn't want to at first, but I begged them. They didn't know how to stop it either. They thought they were helping me keep everything together. They didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I repeated, anger surging again. "They thought they were helping by lying to my face? They sat there and watched me believe everything was fine, watched me love you and said nothing?" Jess covered her face with her hands, unable to look at me. "I know, Dan. I know it's unforgivable. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared. I didn't know how to stop. The weight of everything felt unbearable. I couldn't stay in that house for another second." I grabbed my keys, ignoring Jess's sobs behind me, and stormed out the door. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to get as far away from this nightmare as possible. As I drove aimlessly through the streets, the betrayal gnawed at me deeper and deeper. Jess had destroyed our marriage, yes, but the fact that her entire family had helped her hide it, that was a whole new level of betrayal I couldn't wrap my head around. They had all smiled in my face, pretending to be part of my life, while all the while they knew. They knew the truth and they helped her keep it from me. I didn't know what hurt more, the affair or the fact that everyone I had trusted was in on the lie. The car's engine roared beneath me as I sped down the empty streets, but it wasn't fast enough to outrun the storm raging inside me. The betrayal twisted tighter in my chest with every passing second. Jess's words played over and over in my head. Her other family, her kids, her lies. But the part that burned the most was that her family, the people who had welcomed me in like one of their own, had helped her hide everything. I pulled into an empty parking lot, killed the engine, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind to what was going on right under my nose? I thought about every holiday we'd spent with her family, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. Her parents had smiled at me, her brothers had laughed and joked like we were all one big happy family. The entire time they knew. They knew Jess was living two lives and they said nothing. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, frustration boiling over. How could they have done this to me? How could all of them have watched me day in and day out and never once told me the truth? The worst part was I couldn't escape the thought of those kids, her kids, his kids. All this time Jess had two families. One with me where I thought we were building something real, and another with Jason, a life she kept hidden behind my back. I tried to picture her with them, being a mother to children I'd never known about, while pretending to be my wife. The betrayal stung like nothing I had ever felt before. I rubbed my hands over my face trying to clear the chaos in my head. What was I supposed to do now? There was no going back to normal. That life was gone. Jess's confession had obliterated everything. My marriage, my trust, my entire world, it was all built on lies. I couldn't sit still anymore. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found her brother's number, Mark. He'd always been the one in her family I was closest to. If anyone was going to tell me the truth, it would be him. My heart pounded as I hit call, my mind racing with questions. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Dan? Mark's voice came through, sounding casual, too casual. He didn't know what I knew yet. He had no idea that Jess had already confessed. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice cold, cutting straight to the point. About Jess. About the affair. There was a long, tense pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the air leave Mark's lungs. Dan, I don't know what she's told you, he finally said, his voice shaky. But it's not what you think. Don't lie to me, Mark, I snapped, my anger boiling over again. I already know. Jess told me everything. She told me about Jason, about the kids. She told me that all of you, her whole family, knew and that you helped her keep it from me. The silence on the other end stretched on, and I could feel the weight of Mark's guilt creeping through the phone. Dan, listen, I didn't want to be a part of this, he said, his voice filled with regret. None of us did. But Jess was in a mess and she begged us not to say anything. She didn't know how to get out of it. And you just went along with it? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. You just let her lie to me for years? You all sat there and watched me make a fool of myself? Mark sighed heavily, and for the first time, I could hear the guilt weighing down his words. It wasn't like that, Dan. We didn't know what to do. She swore she would figure it out, that she was going to tell you eventually. She didn't want to destroy your life. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. It's already destroyed. All of it. You should have told me, Mark. One of you should have said something instead of letting me live in the dark. I know, Mark said quietly, his voice breaking. You're right. I'm sorry, man. I should have done more. But I didn't want to get involved. It wasn't my place. It was Jess's mess and I thought she'd handle it. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, she didn't. And now I'm the one dealing with the fallout. Mark didn't have anything else to say. He apologized again, but the words felt hollow, meaningless in the face of what had been done. I ended the call, feeling more lost and alone than ever. If even Mark had gone along with the lie, there was no one I could turn to. Jess had managed to trap me in her web of deceit, and her family had stood by and watched it all happen. I drove aimlessly for a while after that, the roads blurring into one long stretch of nothing. I couldn't go home, couldn't face Jess again. Not yet. But I knew I needed to confront the truth head-on, no matter how painful it was. Finally, I pulled into a bar, a small, dimly lit place that felt as far away from my life as I needed to be. I slid into a booth in the back, ordered a drink, and stared at the glass for what felt like hours, replaying everything in my mind. The moment Jess confessed. The moment I realized her family had betrayed me too. The way my life had unraveled in the span of a few hours. I didn't know how I was going to get through this. I didn't know if there was even a way out. All I knew was that the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been hiding another life, and I had been living in the shadow of that lie for years. And now, I had no idea what came next. The bar was almost empty, just the hum of low conversations in the distance and the clinking of glasses. But all I could hear were the echoes of Jess's confession and the lies that had defined my life for the past 3 years. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the image of Jess with him, with their kids, living a life I knew nothing about. And her family, the people I'd trusted, had been complicit in all of it. I downed the rest of my drink, but it didn't numb the pain like I'd hoped. I stared at the empty glass, feeling more lost than ever. What was I supposed to do now? How could I even begin to piece my life back together when everything had been built on lies? My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I knew who it was. Jess had been texting me nonstop since I left the house, begging for another chance to explain, pleading with me to come home. I ignored the notifications. There was nothing left for her to explain. I knew everything I needed to know. Jess had been lying to me for years, her family had helped her hide the affair, and now my marriage was hanging by a thread. But I couldn't avoid it forever. After a few more minutes of staring at the bar, I picked up my phone and scrolled through her messages. Jess, please come home. We need to talk. Jess, I know I've hurt you, but I need you to understand why this happened. Jess, Dan, please. I can't lose you. Let's talk. Each message felt like a stab to the heart. She was trying to sound desperate, but all I saw was manipulation. Her trying to pull me back into the mess she'd created, trying to salvage the life she'd torn apart. She didn't care about the pain she'd caused, not really. She just didn't want to lose the security of our marriage. I started typing a response, my fingers trembling with anger. Me, what's left to talk about, Jess? You lied. You cheated. You have another family and your parents helped you hide it. What else is there to say? I hit send and stared at the phone, waiting. Her reply came almost instantly. Jess, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It got out of control and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't want to hurt you, but I was scared. Scared. The word made my blood boil. She was scared? I was the one whose life had been torn apart. I was the one left to pick up the pieces of a broken marriage, a broken family, a broken heart. I typed again, not bothering to hold back my anger. Me, you were scared? You didn't want to hurt me? Jess, you've been lying to my face for years. You didn't care about hurting me when you were sneaking off to be with him. You didn't care about me when you were building a whole other life behind my back. Don't pretend this is about protecting me. I tossed the phone down on the bar, my hands shaking with rage. I didn't know what I expected her to say. There was no excuse she could give me that would undo the damage. But a part of me still wanted to know, why? Why did she do it? Why did she let it go on for so long? And why had her family, the people who were supposed to love and support us, been so willing to help her cover up the affair? I picked up the phone again, the questions gnawing at me. I had to know. Even if it didn't change anything, I needed answers. Me, why did your family help you? Why did they lie to me? Did none of them care about what this would do to me? I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. After a few minutes, Jess replied. Jess, they didn't want to hurt you either. They were trying to help me, Dan. They didn't know how deep it had gotten. I begged them to keep it a secret because I didn't know how to tell you. They were just trying to protect me. I laughed bitterly. Protect her. That was what it all came down to, protecting Jess from the consequences of her own choices. Her family had sided with her, enabling her lies, and in the process they had destroyed me. Me, protect you? What about me, Jess? Did any of them care about what this would do to me? Did they care about the life we built together? There was a long pause before her next reply. Jess, they didn't know how to stop it. They didn't want to choose sides, but they felt like they had to. I begged them, Dan. I begged them not to tell you because I thought I could fix it before it blew up. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I stared at her message, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and disbelief. They felt like they had to choose sides? They didn't want to stop it, didn't want to hurt me? The truth was they were all complicit. They had watched me live in ignorance, smile through family dinners, celebrate anniversaries, and not one of them had the decency to tell me that my wife was living a lie. The weight of it was unbearable. Not only had I lost Jess, but I'd also lost her entire family, people I'd thought of as my own. Every holiday, every laugh, every shared memory now felt tainted, fake. They had known. They had watched me fall deeper into a lie, and now I was the one left to deal with the aftermath. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jess. Jess, please come home. We need to talk in person. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I want to try to fix this. I know it's too late for some things, but I love you, Dan. I love you and I don't want to lose you. I couldn't help but feel sick. Well, she was still clinging to that word like it could undo everything. What kind of love allows someone to tear another person apart, to betray them so deeply? The love she spoke of was shallow, twisted by the lies she had fed me for years. I left the bar and got back into my car, my hands trembling as I gripped the wheel. I didn't even know where to go. My house, the one place that should have felt like a sanctuary, felt like a prison filled with memories of a life that had never been real. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed answers, and more than that, I needed closure. I headed home, the tension building in my chest with every mile. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jess's car already parked outside. My stomach twisted. Part of me didn't want to face her, didn't want to hear any more of her excuses, but I knew we couldn't keep dancing around the truth forever. I stepped inside the house, the silence almost deafening. Jess was sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked, but I didn't feel the usual rush of sympathy I once would have. All I could see now was the woman who had shattered everything we'd built. She stood up as soon as she saw me, her hands trembling as she reached out toward me. Dan, I cut her off before she could even finish. Why, Jess? Why did you let this go on for so long? Why did you drag me through years of lies? You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our life, our future, everything we had. Her lip quivered and she wiped at her eyes, struggling to compose herself. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. I was scared. I thought I could keep it separate, that I could keep everything from falling apart. Separate. I repeated, disbelief dripping from my words. How do you separate living two lives? You were lying to my face every day. And your family, your entire family, helped you. Do you understand how much that hurts? I trusted them. I trusted all of you. I know, she sobbed, stepping closer. I know I've destroyed everything and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I still love you, Dan. I love you and I want to try and make this right. I'll do anything. I'll end things with Jason. I'll cut off contact with my family if that's what it takes. Just give me a chance to make it right. I shook my head, her words sounding hollow and desperate. It's too late for that, Jess. There's no fixing this. You can't just erase what's been done. You've been living a lie for years. You have children with him. How am I supposed to look at you and forget that? Her sobs grew louder, her whole body shaking as she dropped to her knees in front of me. Please, Dan. Please don't walk away from us. I know I've ruined everything, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. I stepped back, the sight of her begging only fueling my anger. You didn't care about us when you were sneaking around with him. You didn't care about me when you were with your other family, Jess. Don't pretend you love me now just because you're scared of losing everything. You already lost me the moment you decided to lie. Her sobs grew louder and she tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away again. I couldn't let her drag me back into the web of lies she had created. There was nothing left for us, nothing real anyway. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice firm. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that what we had was real. It wasn't. It was all a lie. She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs echoing through the room, but I couldn't stay there any longer. I turned and walked out the door, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Jess's lies define the rest of my life. As I drove away from the house, away from the wreckage of what had once been my life, a strange sense of clarity began to settle over me. I had lost everything, my marriage, the family I thought I had, the life I had been building, but I hadn't lost myself. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The drive away from the house felt like the longest one of my life. The road stretched out before me, endless, and with each mile I put between myself and the wreckage of my marriage, a strange mix of sadness and relief settled in my chest. The truth had finally come out, the lies exposed, and while the pain still clung to me, I knew I couldn't stay trapped in that life any longer. I didn't know where I was going, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was leaving the mess behind, starting something, anything, that didn't involve Jess's lies or the betrayal of her family. I drove aimlessly, my mind drifting to thoughts of what might come next. Could I rebuild after all of this? Would I ever be able to trust anyone again? Eventually, I pulled into a park and parked the car, sitting in the silence. It was late, the moon casting a dim light over the empty space. I got out and walked toward a bench, the night air cool against my skin. Sitting there, surrounded by the quiet, the weight of everything that had happened finally began to sink in. It wasn't just the affair that had destroyed my marriage, it was the betrayal by everyone around me. Jess's family, people I had considered my own, had helped her hide the truth. They had watched me live in the dark for years, knowing the entire time that Jess had another life, another family. The anger simmered, but it was different now. It wasn't the burning rage that had consumed me before, it was a quiet, exhausted kind of anger. The kind that sits deep in your chest and doesn't leave, but eventually becomes something you live with. I didn't know how to move on from this. Every part of my life felt tainted. Every memory I had with Jess, every smile, every shared moment, was now colored by the knowledge of her betrayal. But sitting there, under the cold, quiet night sky, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of me. It felt like it, sure, but I wasn't going to let this break me. Jess had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let her take my future too. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I glanced down at the screen. It was Jess again. Her name flashed on the screen and for a moment I debated answering. Maybe there was more to say, more closure to seek. But deep down, I knew that nothing she said could change what had happened. There was no going back. No amount of tears, no amount of promises could rebuild what she had shattered. I silenced the phone and put it back in my pocket, the decision made. I wouldn't be answering her calls anymore. I needed to cut the ties that had been holding me to a life that was built on lies. A few minutes later, as I sat staring out into the night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. I hesitated, then unlocked the phone to read it. Mark, Dan, I'm so sorry for what happened. I had no idea how deep things had gotten. I feel terrible about not telling you sooner. Please, if you want to talk, I'm here. Mark. Of all the people in Jess's family, he was the one I trusted the most. And now, even he had been part of the conspiracy to keep the truth from me. I didn't know what I was supposed to say to him. How could I ever look at any of them again? The betrayal wasn't just Jess's, it was a family affair, woven into the fabric of everything I thought I knew. But maybe I needed to respond. Maybe I needed to say something to Mark to fully close this chapter. After a long pause, I started typing. I don't know if we can ever be close again, Mark. You lied to me, all of you. I trusted you, and you let me live in the dark while Jess built a whole other life. I don't know if that's something I can forgive. I hit send and stared at the phone, waiting. A part of me wanted him to fight for our friendship, to convince me that I wasn't alone, that there was still someone in Jess's family who cared about me. But another part of me didn't care anymore. I needed to move on, and maybe that meant cutting ties with all of them. A few minutes later, Mark replied. Mark, you're right, Dan. We should have told you. I wish I had. I'm sorry, man. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just want you to know that I do care about you. If you ever need anything, I'll be here. I read the message a few times, then slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding. Maybe one day I'd be able to talk to Mark again, but right now, I needed space from all of them. I needed to find out who I was without Jess, without her family, without the lies that had suffocated me for so long. I stayed in that park for a while longer, staring out at the night, thinking about everything that had happened. The pain was still there, but with each passing moment, it felt a little less sharp, a little less overwhelming. By the time I left, I wasn't healed, not by a long shot. But I felt like I had taken the first step toward something new. Something that didn't involve lies and betrayal. I had lost so much, but I hadn't lost myself. And that, I realized, was the most important thing. As I drove home, I didn't think about Jess. I didn't think about her family or her other life, or the future I'd thought we were building. I thought about what my future would look like, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like a future that was mine to decide. And that was enough.